Global politics. Humanity and human society cannot be regarded as indivisible unity. Since even Earth is divided, though artificially into the hemispheres by equator, thus there are two hemispheres, northern and southern. This division may be of great use for those who deal with international relations and global politics, as the division of the earth into hemispheres almost coincides with the division of the countries into the rich countries and the poor countries. Kigley and Raymond state that the disparity are profound and in many places appears to be growing. Thus, there are two terms that operate in the sphere of international relations: global north and global south. Global north stands for the wealthy and industrialized countries that are mainly situated in the northern hemisphere. In its turn, the term global south stands for the less developed countries, which are mainly located in the southern hemisphere. Kegley and Raymond. Though socio-economic and political inequality corresponds with the geographical division of the countries into hemispheres, this division do not entirely coincide. For instance, Australia is the developed country, though poverty, inequality, and subordination have always existed. Nowadays, the international situation may be characterized by unprecedented proportion of inequality that demand special attention. In the light of the world financial crisis, the less developed countries deserve special attention. Foreign policy and the Fund of Peace. The consideration of reason for the historically fixed division of more than 200 states and the ways to bridge the gap between global north and global south need immediate consideration, as well as the tool that may be used for that. The essence of the gap between global north and the global south consists in the following: the innermost gap in income of the citizens, the difference of economic specialization of the countries, the gap in the state of health and education, the difference of political influence of the country. The key criteria of the determination of the fragile country is the level of poverty. The ranking offered by foreign policy states that Somalia is the leading country in the rating of less developed countries that is characterized by highest demographic pressure, economic decline, etc. The countries of the global south are characterized by high level of inflation, as it is stated by Javed Salehi Isfahani concerning the situation in Iran. Inflation doubled in annual terms from 15 to 30% in 2008. However, if inflation decreased in 2009, the level of unemployment became higher. Salehi Isfahani. Thus, unemployment is one more problem of critical importance for the countries of global south. Though unemployment is the problem that is typical of the majority of developed countries as well, its greater danger for the less developed countries is evident. The same author stated that the rate of unemployment in Iran is about 20%, with 3 out of 4 unemployed Iranians under the age of 30. Higher level of unemployment together with extreme poverty, which may be illustrated by the fact that a lot of inhabitants of less developed countries spend less than $1 on living, are the evidence of the critical situation in the global south. The difference of specialization of the countries that belong to the developed and the developing countries is evident. The North specializes at the manufacturing of goods and the rendering service that provide great level of profit for these countries. The service offered by those countries are based on higher technologies developed in the countries. In turn, the developing countries serve as the source of raw material and commodities. This specialization cannot provide high income level of the countries, especially if we take into account Rubani's idea that commodity prices, which already fell sharply in the second half of 2008, will face further price pressure in 2009. Kharwas also stresses the dependency of the poorest countries on commodities. Some like Sudan export commodities, and this factor makes the country vulnerable. Others like Bangladesh suffer from a lack of commodity and have to import them. The availability of the commodities for the population at market price explain the weak situation of the countries like this one. Extreme poverty and the poor economic state of the countries of global south are responsible for the poor state of health and education in comparison with the developed countries. Finally, as for the place on the international arena, the developing countries have far less influence than developed countries. On considering the essence of gap, it is necessary to tackle the reason for the striking inequality of the countries of the two hemispheres. This reason includes the consequences of colonialism, the instability of government brain drain, lack of attention to the development of free trade, etc. It is worth mentioning that a lot of developing countries share colonial past. Nowadays, it has the consequence of the countries' inability to develop indigenous technologies that would correspond to their resources. This is why the countries still depend greatly on multinational cooperation on the first world and simply serve as the source of raw material. On the whole, these countries are mostly agricultural countries. This is why such problem as water issue may also cause the aggravation of economic crisis in the countries that may be already observed by the example of Pakistan and India. Historical and geographical reasons are important, but so is the failure of the state to provide development of the country. Brain drain is one of the reasons and the consequence of the gap between countries. It is caused by a high level of unemployment and the absence of demands for efficient specialists, especially in the sphere of high technologies, because of the above-mentioned development of these technologies in the developing countries. Dickinson mentioned corruption and mismanagement among the reasons of poor state of the developing countries. A lot of the countries of the third world may be characterized by failure state. He defines this state as those that no longer serve their people because they deliver low quantities and qualities of political goods to their citizens, and they have lost their monopoly on violence. As for Somalia, the author even resorts to the term collapsed government. Among the ways of solving the problems with the global south is the establishment of cooperation between the countries of the third world. However, international assistance is also needed. The involvement of UN and NGOs into the process of development of the countries will foster their progress. UN main functions are the maintenance of international security, economic development, and the guarantee of human rights. As it is stated above, all these criteria are being violated in the countries of Global South. UN activity may be supported by the activity of NGOs such as the World Trade Organization in Geneva. The activity of the UN and the NGOs will ensure the spirit of globalization in Global South, which will provide the developing countries with the trade, capital flow, and the technological development. Thus, globalization is needed by developing countries despite controversial views on it. These ideas correspond to the theoretical ground of liberalism, which presupposes the relationship between states not only on political basis but on economical basis as well, though activity of non-governmental organizations. It may be stated that if developing countries choose to resist globalization and choose politics of non-alignment that was typical of them, it will create additional difficulty for them. In case of policy of non-alignment, the countries will remain powerless on the world arena. In the light of the seriousness of global problems, such as global financial crisis, climate problems, and the threat of natural disaster, the need of cooperation between developed and developing countries is evident. Drawing a conclusion, it may be stated that the seriousness of inequality of the countries is evident. Contemporary situation in the world that is determined by the global financial crisis and climate change has increased the need for cooperation of all countries in the world. Globalization may be seen as the way that will bridge the gap between the countries of Global North and Global South. UN and NGOs may be considered effective tools for globalization. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our YouTube channel for more videos and press bell icon for latest updates.